Hey there, everybody. This is Mike, and this is just a random blog, video blog about this new offshore moratorium that's put in place with all the new offshore drilling that's been going on. The White House now wants, BP to pay all the salaries of all these oil rig workers that no longer have a job because of any new offshore drilling has been halted. Therefore, they don't have any work. I truly do. I feel sorry for these guys. I really, really do. But on the same hand, it's also a point of how many unemployed Americans do you know of? I bet you know of several personally that don't have a job right now. Now, BP has to be responsible for one, for the cleanup and capping that oil well. Every single barrel of oil that's leaked into the Gulf of Mexico has a $4,300 fine attached to it. Every single barrel needs to be precisely calculated, and BP has to pay those incredible fines down to the very, very last barrel. Okay, now all the Gulf Coast, all the shrimpers, the fishermen, all the people that depend on tourists with the beaches, everybody that's getting sick because of the oil, all these people have legitimate claims. And when I say legitimate, I mean they deserve money because of everything that BP has done to them. With all the paperwork they submitted for the right in order to drill that well, it was a copy and paste mechanism in which the doctor they put into that memo, in order for anybody to call if there was ever an oil accident, died in 2005. And they actually submitted this paperwork in 2009. When you take a look at the paperwork, it's all a bunch of bogus BS. I mean, protecting walruses and sea lions in the Gulf of Mexico, really? I didn't know they existed. I thought they were just in northern climates. I thought they were just in northern cold waters. But that's just me. I guess I'm an idiot. But here's the thing. With these oil workers that aren't going to have a job drilling these new oil wells, you know what? I believe that they should be just the same as us. Now, sure, they were affected because of the new moratorium put in place, because of the offshore drilling that cannot go on right now. Now, continuous wells can continue pumping oil, and there's over 4,000 of those wells in the Gulf, and they're all pumping oil, but you just can't drill any new wells. And these guys that are these oil rig operators that are out there drilling these new wells, they get paid a lot of money. They live some pretty extravagant lives. You take a look at what they have, and I mean, they do. They get paid a lot of money because what they do is a very, very dangerous job. But with all that being said, the more and more you're going to put on BP, the more and more less likely it's going to be they can pay for everything. Now, you take a look at stockholders. Today or yesterday, BP stock fell by almost 52%. Okay, so now there's really a real chance that BP could be going bankrupt. BP can no longer stand for British Petroleum, Beyond Petroleum, but Bankrupt Petroleum. Now, I wrote about this in one of my blogs on the on repelthestatic.wordpress.com, and I started thinking about this a couple weeks ago. Exactly what would happen in the situation and the circumstances that would lead to BP going bankrupt. Now, if BP goes bankrupt, we're all completely screwed. Now, here's my idea. What do we do with nations whenever there's an act of war, or whenever there's something that happens that's detrimental to our national security? We freeze all the assets of that country. We freeze all assets of that country, whether it be in our banks or other banks across the world. We get with our allies, they freeze those assets, and we freeze the money that's tied up in banking systems with that country. Now, when you take a look at BP in its own right is its own country. It's got its own money to become its own country. It is the fifth most profitable company in the universe. They make so much money, it is ridiculously just stupid. So why can't we put a freeze on their accounts? Now, and with these shareholders and these stockholders, that have put money into BP, they need to be held accountable as well. Now, you may say this goes against capitalism, this goes against democracy. Well, the American dream is based off short gain. And, whenever someone finds out that there's a possibility of buying a stock and you can make a lot of money at it real quick, guess what? Those stocks get bought up. They don't think about any kind of repercussions. They don't think about any consequences. All they think about is making their portfolio larger. Now, when you make your portfolio larger, you become richer, you gain more credit, you can start buying all the cool stuff you want, all the stuff that just makes you think that you're special and that everything is great in the universe. But one thing about investors is investors that have invested in BP should be responsible just as much as BP. And I think that because, there's always the adage that, if I'm a shareholder, I'm also a part owner of your company. But now that something like this has happened, now shareholders have the ability to pull out their money and say, oh, I don't want nothing to do with BP. But when they're making money, it's all about, oh, I'm part owner of BP. Now with these shareholders, why don't they care? Why isn't there more transparency with the companies and the shareholders, showing them what they do, how they do it, what they're doing, and what kind of safeguards and policies are in place in case something goes wrong? There are none. All we see is just these numbers being flashed upon a screen, and we decide whether or not to buy those stocks because we think those stocks will do well. And we're all happy thinking that we're part owner of these humongously large companies. But the matter is that if you are part of one of these large companies and you're a shareholder, and you know what, if the assets get frozen, I think you just need to deal with it. Because you are so happy to claim as you're being part owner of that company, but then when shit hits the fan, now all of a sudden you want to jump out and bail out. Because now you don't want your money to start disappearing. I think once you start investing in a company and you become part of that company, you become a shareholder of that company, you become a part owner of that company, therefore you should share the same responsibility as that company. You get it? Does that start to make any sense at all? Therefore, before BP has the ability for all their shareholders in order to start dumping all their cash out and saying, hey, we don't want nothing to do with this, you know what? There should be something put in place to where these accounts are froze. And I know of the political and the financial backlash of all this, but you know what? You got to put the politics and the finances behind every bit of this. You got to think about the long-term effects of this country because of this oil spill. You got to think of the long-term effects of our future generations of this oil spill. You got to think about the livelihoods of all these people that have been affected by the oil spill, with tourism, the shrimping, the fishermen, everything I mentioned before. And these guys that were going to go out and drill new oil wells out there in the deep, or whether it be in the shallow, now because of a moratorium, yeah, they're affected, but they're affected in a different way. They're affected because of future jobs. Now, you know what? I feel so bad for these guys. I really do. Men and women, I understand, but you know what? I'm unemployed, and it sucks ass. I'll be the first one to admit that. It sucks. But you know what? It's part of being an American right now. And the one thing about being American is that we need to become more responsible for what we do, no matter how big or how small the actions. We need to quit just being able to jump ship whenever we feel that something's going to get a little bit tough. So, you know what? I hope that maybe what I said makes sense. It maybe not, but you know what? That's just my feelings on the matter. And I know a lot of people are not going to agree with what I have to say. But at this point in time, I really don't care. Because there needs to become a point in time when not only do these companies need to be held responsible, but also the shareholders that own stock in that company and have made tremendous amounts of money off that company. Like all the people that have just gotten the part of the $10.2 billion dividends that BP just paid out just for this quarter alone. Now these people that are making all this money, they're just as responsible as BP. Therefore, believe me, freeze the accounts so that they can no longer have stockholders taking their stocks and running for the hills. Freeze every single account BP has. Therefore, the money will stay there for this cleanup and everything else, and for the claims of the people that have been directly affected by this. Not by the future drill rig workers, but for the people that are suffering health effects. They lost revenue and money because of fishing, shrimping, tourism, and everything else. And all the workers that are out there working. Volunteers my ass. Start paying the volunteers, BP.